Keith. Any idea where I could find him?
You police plan on taking me in?
I would much prefer that to the alternative.
Every leap of civilization was built off the back of slaves. Replicants are the future, but I can only make so many. I had the lock, and he has the key.
I think I found him.
That's not possible. If this gets out, we've bought ourselves a war.
This is the Film Board from The Next Reel, and we spoil movies. I'm Pete Wright, and this month we're go-go for Gosling in Denis Villeneuve's Blade Runner 2049. Thugs in residence for tonight's roundtable, Andy Nelson.
That's the worst way to say my name in French that I've ever heard. I'm a little embarrassed that you actually just said that.
What is it? How would you say it?
Certainly not that.
Andre and Stefan Sarmento.
So, do you need me to complete a baseline test? Because I'm feeling a little off tonight.
Yes, I want to make some sense of a baseline test. But before we do that, you can find out more about this show and its sibling shows at thenextreel.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter at thenextreel. And we greatly appreciate your direct support on Patreon at patreon.com/thenextreel. Subscribers get access to our members-only Slack group, which is awesome. Special shows like the weekly Saturday matinee, which we just did this morning as we record this, and other fun perks for subscribing. Thank you so much for your support. Oh, I think it's fair to say that we were all angsty going into this movie. And boy, I don't even know where to begin. So I'll toss it to you, Andy. Where would you start in talking to this, and Andre?
Well, that's a good question. I guess the a good place to start is how does this? This is a sequel that came after a film. 1982 is when Blade Runner came out. So kind of like, it's been a very long time. Even like the Mad Max Fury Road sequel had, Mad Max Thunderdome when was that, like 90 or something like that? So it didn't have as long of a wait, and it had more sequels that it was following. This was a film that was really kind of a standalone sci-fi film, and for all intents and purposes, really wasn't screaming out for a sequel. I know there had been conversations about, hey, let's make a sequel of this, but it never really seemed to be serious. And so I was a little skeptical. I thought the film set up, the first film set up a pretty solid storyline and a pretty clear arc for Deckard's character. And, seeing the trailer for this, I'm like, why is Harrison Ford still alive? And it really kind of plagued me, and it made me really nervous about this. But I feel like the filmmakers and the storytellers who were all involved in making this, they were smart about making a sequel, and they did it in a way that I felt was pretty respectful of the original film and of the entire world that those filmmakers had created. And I feel like they did a good job of finding ways to make everything make sense. I felt like there was enough for me to buy into why Deckard lasted for so long. It never really is spelled out, but the fact that, Rachel, we see some of her bones, and she was a Nexus 7, which, they seem like an early version of the Nexus 8, where they kind of live, a natural life. And so then it's kind of assumed that, well, Deckard was probably of that make, and he lasted as long as he did. So they came up with reasons for everything, and I really feel that it sold the story really well. So I had a really good time with this, and I just wasn't sure what to expect going into it, but I did have a great time.
This is the completion of the Blade Runner story. I mean, this is the companion to the original. I was transported back to the same world, the music, production design, lighting. I had just watched, Blade Runner Final Cut last week, and I watched those little shorts that sort of filled in some story points. I probably could have gotten by without them. I just really enjoyed this a lot. It did everything that I think I was hoping for, which is to tell a really mature, complex story that tackles some big questions, doesn't give easy answers to everything, but which is what I think was so great about the first one, because, 40 years later, there's still debates and discussion about, is Deckard a replicant? And here's the evidence that says he is, and maybe he's not. And we've got like 4 versions of the film. It was just such ripe source material. And I love how they respected that and were able to move everything forward and tell a story that didn't feel like a cobbled together sequel, but a story that was the natural extension of the first film.
I'm a little bit torn personally on how I'm going to see this as a standalone film. Like, for people who, you both have said it's been a long time, and there are going to be people who see this movie who haven't seen the first, and it needs to be able to satisfy, them as well. Does it hold up as a standalone film for people who haven't seen the first one? For me, it absolutely doesn't need to. I, like you, Steve, I watched the final cut yesterday in preparation for this, and I feel very much like this movie was deeply respectful of the original, of the vision, of the the Ridley Scott vision, and of the sort of cyberpunk kind of not cyberpunk noir, whatever you want to call it, the look, the feel of it. The other thing I think they did really well is that they built so much, right? I mean, there was real substance and texture and just like weight to everything. You could, and in interviews with Villeneuve, he talks about how important it is that the actors are able to inhabit every prop, every the spinners, the sets. They're all built, they're all manufactured, and obviously accentuated with CG. But you can really feel the substance of this movie like few other science fiction movies today. I got a real feel for the actors' familiarity on set, and I think you get these real highlight sequences that I can't shake. Nyander's office. That floating platform on the water with the lights that are constantly, moving and fading and shading in and out. It's just a stunning visual treat. And for that reason, I find myself a little bit lost because it's so beautiful and so long that I just know I have to see this film again and again and again to feel like I've actually taken it all in. On the note of the mystery, I feel like we just have to talk for a minute about. I guess there's a meta puzzle here, right? The storyline, as you've mentioned, of the Deckard replicant question. Is it answered in this film satisfactorily? Because we know that Ridley Scott, he's on tape saying that Deckard is a replicant, and we know that Harrison Ford says no, Deckard's not a replicant. And I just watched an interview with Harrison Ford on Vice, and the delightful interviewer says, is Deckard a replicant? And he says, it's resolved. That question is resolved, but I'm not going to tell you. And she says, well, God damn it, Harrison, why not? Because Vice News is awesome. And his answer was, because then the question would be answered and there would be no more reason to debate. And I love and hate Harrison Ford for that answer, because I feel like I need it more sort of solid than that. So what, to your satisfaction, is this a resolved issue? Is Deckard a replicant?
Do you want us to end the debate right here?
Yeah, end it for me. I'd be curious if you agree. Do you want to say it on a count of 3? We're playing rock, paper, scissors, replicant.
I think he absolutely is. I think it's pretty clear.
I think it's ambiguous. I think it's ambiguous because there's no definitive evidence for me, because we get the close-up examination of Rachel's skeleton where we see serial number on there. We have the hair. We have no testing that's done to Deckard or anything to indicate whether he is or is not. The fact that, getting into story now of a replicant that is able to have a child, to me, skews the case towards Deckard possibly being human, because it's a combination. The child is a combination that's part replicant, part human, which I think maybe explains a few things about the child versus replicants being able to reproduce on their own. Because if there's something special about either Rachel or Deckard as a replicant, and that could be one way to resolve this, is there something unique about how they were created that allows them to reproduce? Or is it something about the combination of human and replicant that is creating this? And to me, it's one that I feel that you can go either way, and you can be satisfied either way with how you approach the story. Because to me, it's not an important and pivotal question that needs to be answered. It's the one that I think people want answered. But to me, the story's about such larger, more philosophical questions about, identity and belonging and self, that whether or not one character is or is not one thing does not matter to me that much.
Ooh, Andy?
I mean, I can see what he's saying. I get the point, but I feel like there has been enough evidence. And, this is one of those things that I think is interesting, because you're right. They've never come out and blatantly said, in context of the film, like in the story, they've never said, well, Deckard, you're a replicant. But I feel like there has been evidence. Now, I feel like this is one of those things where it's probably the filmmakers planting evidence just to make people, assume one thing, but they aren't giving you the final answers. And so you could probably, find evidence pointing the other direction as well. But I feel like in the first Blade Runner, you have those telltale signs of the way their eyes will glow when light hits it. And you see that on Deckard when he's kind of talking to Rachel, and he's kind of in the background out of focus, and you see that glow in his eyes. And then there's the whole unicorn, the dream that he has of the unicorn with the little thing. I mean, those are things that I've always taken that, the people in his precinct understand that, he is a replicant. Gaff knows it. He leaves the little unicorn for him because he knows that he has that unicorn dream implant in him. And in this film, I mean, he says, they've been hunting us. I mean, now, again, you can kind of, step past all of that and say, well, yeah, but there's all these other things. So, I mean, I think that Steve's right. It's a question that they don't feel the need to answer because it may not really matter in the scheme of things, but it is a fun debate to have.
Well, and I think it does matter in the context of this film that the debate is going on simply because we're introducing in the script the language of miracles, right? You haven't actually seen a miracle, says Dave Bautista's character, Sapper Morton. And so once we're in there, once we're talking about, mechanical life evolving to, biological life, at least to the point of being able to give birth, then we have to be open to the fact that, or to the possibility that mechanical life could evolve to age, right? Something that we haven't really explored, right? And we didn't know because their age, systems were like with these sort of the unlimited age models, right? We just didn't know. And so I think it is kind of important that we at least have that in the back of our mind to understand, how many layers of miracle are we addressing here? I think it makes the film more interesting to me. I will say just a last point. I miss my time to die speech. I miss that climax at the end. Who's my Rutger Hauer in this film? I don't feel like I got it. The thing that I'm going to go back to, to talking, to quoting over and over and over again yet.
No, I didn't feel like the script had that sort of moment, but I do feel like it had a lot of really great moments. And while I agree, I really love some of that sort of dialogue. I did feel like there were some moments that are going to stand out for me. And I mean, I think that the fight on I guess you could call it the shore, the metal shore that they're battling
the wall
on,
against the wall,
right, against that kind of that wall with I think it's Love and Kay. are fighting out there, and I thought that was just kind of a really fantastic scene. I enjoyed the intensity of it with the waves kind of crashing in. And there were a lot of moments like that, all through this film. I really felt like the filmmakers took the moments from Blade Runner and really just kind of kept giving us a lot of the meat, and it felt wholly authentic in this world. And so I didn't have those moments, but to a certain extent, I was okay with it because I felt like it had wrapped me in it so much that I felt like I was still in it without needing those.
Yeah. And to that point, and not to belabor this too much, I promise, but it never made sense to me if Deckard was not a replicant. It never made sense to me that he would be a Blade Runner. And that's something that this film, I feel, puts to bed, that we now have this cast of people who are Blade Runners, and it's just out there because they are a model of replicant that doesn't run, that is more sort of subservient, but you have to have a Blade Runner go after replicants because there's no one else who's strong enough to do it, right? The opening fight between Kay and Sapper Morton is evidence of that. That is a shocking physical beating as he is just smashing Gosling's head into the wall and then through it, and there's just no substantive physical consequence like that. That answers the question that replicants have to take down replicants, and there must have been something else that couldn't do it, for me anyway. That they couldn't talk about the fact that he was a replicant because he was a Blade Runner, and that would shock his system. So, and that fight at the end that you're talking about is another one that just cements that. That's a fight that would be physically impossible for a non-replicant to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hampton Fancher and Michael Green. Michael Green is, I guess, stepping in, playing the role of David Webb Peoples, as credited on the original screenwriter. But Hampton Fancher is back.
It's a really solid script. I mean,
Yeah.
Bringing back somebody who had worked on the original script, I think was smart. I for some reason I always thought, I can't remember. I watched the making of that what was that documentary called, Dangerous Days, the making of Blade Runner.
Yeah.
Really amazing. But it's been so many years, I can't remember. But I feel like there was something going on between Hampton Fancher and David Webb Peoples as far as like who ended up really writing the script that we ended up with. And I feel like it was David Webb Peoples, and Hampton Fancher's initial version wasn't the one that they focused on quite as much. Yeah. So between the two writers, it was a little interesting to me that they went with Hampton Fancher. I don't know if they tried. I don't know the history of this particular screenplay. But that being said, I feel like these people really captured the essence of the world. So like I said, I was really impressed with what they brought to the table here.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was concerned because when I look at Michael Green's credits, you compare him to David Webb Peoples, and there's, I mean, two totally different caliber writers in my opinion, because I look at David Webb Peoples and you've got Blade Runner, you've got Unforgiven, you've got 12 Monkeys. I mean, some really just compelling, strong writing. And with Michael Green, we saw it earlier this year and it was sort of a split decision for me, Logan and Alien Covenant. And thankfully, I think I got more Logan than Alien Covenant from Michael Green in this script. So I'm happy to see that. And I don't know the nature of the collaboration between the two or the contributions, but I thought they tackled a huge story. There's twists. The way things it kept me moving along, and it gave me what I needed, and it took its time to tell everything. It didn't, this was a movie that it starts and it's not dumping exposition. I got some text at the beginning to just sort of set up like the basic premise, but I don't have exposition dumps throughout here really. It's characters engaging with each other in ways that I felt it's an adult movie in the fact that these are mature adults interrogating each other regarding, what they're trying to accomplish or who they are. And it's just at a very cerebral level. And I appreciate that it's not talking down to its audience. It's keeping you in the dark about some things. It's recontextualizing certain information later on. That's just so many things that it's doing that I again, can't wait to go see this again to just really enjoy everything and have a chance to really engage on it, because there's so much stimulus going on for me in this with visuals that I was so compelled by because of wanting to see the faithfulness to the original, that now I feel like I can really pay a lot more attention to story, dialogue, and really engage on a deeper level with that.
Yeah, it's a movie that really, and I feel like this is a bit rare, a big budget, major science fiction motion picture that trusts the audience enough not to do the exposition dump, and that it's rare, and it feels so much like the original film, even though, and I think actually this is an improvement over the original film. We don't have any sequences in here, to my ear, that are unclear in their narrative purpose beyond just giving us exposition, like in the lieutenant's office in the first movie, where we have this explanation of, here's Roy, and they're replicants, and there is a feeling on first watch of that scene that why are they telling us all this? He's explaining all of this to a Blade Runner who should know. And when you listen to the commentary, you hear the writers say, well, he's trying to explain that things are different than they were the last time Deckard worked for the department. Things are different. He needs to know what's up, and so there is a purpose to it, but it's not clear, and it looks clumsy until you actually hear somebody talk about it. And it's something I hear. It's a constant complaint about the first Blade Runner is this exposition, that's only for the audience's sake, and you have to really work to forgive that. I didn't get any of this in the script for 2049 to my ear, unless you guys feel like you missed it. Was there anything that just seemed sloppy like that?
No, I mean, it's a long film, but I feel like they take their time with everything, and I feel like it's all very intentional. Like everything felt so intentional throughout. It was quite impressive.
Very patient. It really took its time, and I think that you tie in the script to the unbelievable visuals most of the time. And I'm with you, Steve. That opening shot in particular, of the eyeball, which is such an iconic close-up. The way the first film uses eyes, the affinity with eyes in this movie it's like a love letter to the first film. It's just beautiful. But to open with it, that huge dramatic eye, that incredible soundscape cutting to the farms, those crazy protein farms as we're flying over it, it just ends up being a lovely composition.
And really expansive on what we saw in the first film. I mean, the first film felt, in retrospect, very small compared to this one. I mean, it's such a big, it was already such an intense, amazing sci-fi film anyway. But this one, I mean, there's so much more stuff that we get to see. We get to go to these farms like you just brought up. We get to go down to the trash wasteland of San Diego or whatever it is now. We get to go to Las Vegas. There's these different parts of the world that we get to explore now, and the airport, which is out in the middle of the ocean. Like, there were a lot of really exciting new things that we got to see. So I just loved how they expanded on the world. It was just it was really great, and they just did a marvelous job of giving us that expansion.
Did either of you go home and start looking for your own joy? I feel like the artificial intelligent relationship in this movie was, pretty much. I don't know how can I say this without getting in trouble. Let's just say Ana de Armas did a terrific job playing Joy, and the artificial intelligent relationship. I was worried when he got back to his apartment and started having this conversation with nobody. I thought that was very clever and very cool. And as soon as I got it, I was worried that it was going to become a gimmick.
Yeah.
And man, it was anything but. It wasn't gimmicky. It wasn't a distraction. It was a substantive character relationship with an AI that made total sense, like hand to glove. And I wanted to just shout it from the rooftops. I loved that part. Am I alone?
Oh, no. What I really loved was you're projecting technology, 30 years in advance from now, but you can see it grounded in things that exist today because you've got a hologram that's walking around because you've got this huge ceiling rig mounted with a camera to track, he eventually gets the upgrade, but I'm looking at that saying, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
I can see that as a concept right now in a prototype form where it's like, oh, you mount this in your room. This thing is going to swing around all over your room, attached to the ceiling to project this hologram that you're going to interact with. And then even the concept of a replicant who is self-aware. He's a replicant because he talks about his memories and knowing that those memories are implants. So he knows he's not human. He's not operating under that illusion. And he has to entertain himself an AI. So you've got human replicant AI of just sort of this food chain of like artificiality. And so his relationship, with Joy, I thought was very interesting to see that and what that says about him and his need to connect. And then what she does with the relationship was just, oh my gosh, she's present everywhere. I love the whole Peter and the Wolf theme, being tied to her, that it would pop up at different points. And the fact that she finds companionship for him because she's there to be there for him in whatever capacity that is, was just something that just came out of nowhere. And I thought, this is so enriching for me to see that they're spending this much time into these characters.
Oh, that the sex scene was amazing. I have never, we talk sometimes about, the little gifts that these films give us, the things that we've never seen before. I have never seen that ever. And it was so smart and super sexy and really emotionally intense, and not it wasn't just some sort of objectification.
No, and the technology, with the CGI, how you're doing this visually, it was just astounding. And that's one thing this film does so well is we're going to use some really advanced, CGI and effects, but we're not doing it to show off. It's in service of the story of how can we do this? How does this fit in? And to me, that scene of where Joy's, telling her, hey, shut up, stop moving. I'm getting synced so that her image will be mapped onto her, and the slight delay, the lag, just so trippy looking, but just, I'm looking at this like dumbfounded. This looks good. It looks really good. This is not one of these hokey things where they're just sort of layering one thing on. It was astounding to me.
That's right. This ain't no Second Life. No way.
Yeah, it was it was smartly done, and it thematically made sense, and that's why I think it's a big success, because they integrated that idea of that companionship so well into the story that, like you said, Steve, when you want to integrate the effects in a way where it's not just for show, and they not only integrated it into the story but thematically as well, and so it became so perfectly logical for it to be there. And so I had such a great time watching those scenes, and just every scene with Joy, the sex scene when Joy is with I can't remember the other actress's name who comes in there, but just the way that all plays out is just so fascinating. I will say, just as a side note with Joy, just as far as a random little note, it was odd to me that, not that I was looking for it, but it was odd to me that Joy was the only model that they advertised, and there were no other models, and there were no male models. I was like, it's kind of odd that the only version out there is a female companion. I assume there must be others, but that's all we had.
Yeah, that's interesting. Although I have to say, like, just the fact that it was just Joy and the final, I guess, ultimate destruction of his image of kind of who he is at the end, or after it comes out that in fact he's not who he expected to discover that he was, and he's walking alone down that raised highway, and he sees the giant 8-story Joy hologram advertisement nude standing next to him, and she uses the same language and calls him Joe and pokes at him, what a day, huh? All that stuff. That it turns out she was a generic kind of print of this companion made his kind of realization that much more real or human than I think I expected it to be. And I thought that was really classy.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, exactly.
When we first started talking about Denis, I think we were all nervous, and I feel like when we found out that Denis was going to have this movie, it was a long time ago, and we've seen a couple of his films since then. And I think as he has quickly risen to one of your very favorite filmmakers, Steve. How did he do as a director?
I mean, just tremendously respectful of sort of the source material. But I think he can, I don't know. He's got the magic right now. And, I was really thrilled after seeing Arrival last year to see, here's a guy that can take a really complicated story and he can tell it well without losing the audience, without getting people confused. And he can do it in a way that is entertaining multiple times on viewing. And so I think, I go back to, I think the first film of his we watched was, we did on the film board, we did Prisoners. Mm-hmm. And I think that I recall that being a film we had a lot of interesting discussion about. And I think he's been able to continually find stories that are more than sort of the genre that they fall into, that there's some complexity in character. He always is able to lift that up to the top. This isn't just a director that's all style. He's able to really put together these stories and really put them out there for us. So I am still cautiously optimistic about his next project being Dune. But after this, I have much, more faith, and that studios are willing to trust him to do things that I think are really out there on the edge, that, fly in the face of, oh, this is what popular opinion wants. We're going to get this more of the same, and let him risk something and trust him with that, because he delivers, just art that is, astounding to me.
I would just, on that last point, this movie has resolved for me any question about Dune, because for me, in my, heart of hearts, this is a much more sort of important story to handle deftly, and he did that than Dune. So I have every confidence that he'll be able to pull off Dune. No question.
I wonder if Dune's going to end up happening. It's such a big film, such a big story to tell. Yeah. But I mean, as excited as we are about this particular film, it is really falling flat at the box office, which makes me wonder if that's going to be something that might affect Deneuve's ability to pull something like Dune off, or to let for the studios to let him have the money to do it. It might be too ambitious of a project for anyone to jump on board with.
True. That's curious.
So,
yeah, that is interesting. I hope this this sort of stretches its legs a little bit as more people start talking about it, because I think it's worth it.
I hope so too. I think he's one of the great directors working right now. The stuff that he brings to the table is just really, really solid. And I enjoy the way that he tells his stories. He is not afraid of handling complex stories. I think we've, every film I've seen of his, starting with Incendie up to this, has been a relatively complex story, and he is a person who knows how to tell that story and does it in a way where you know what's going on, but you don't feel lost. I mean, I really appreciate the way that he kind of pulls that off, because it's hard, I think, sometimes for filmmakers to do that. And I think that he handles little moments really well. I also think he handles big, intense moments really well. I think he's shown that a number of times. And certainly in this particular film, we have some just amazing, amazing small character moments that are incredibly poignant and touching and just kind of heartbreaking. And then you have some big, action scenes. So he's one of those filmmakers who I think really can handle all of it in a complex story and in a big world. And so I really love and respect everything that he's bringing to the table right now.
I can't wait to see an average shot length measure of this movie, because I feel like he has, and that's something that you notice in Blade Runner 2, especially the final cut, that he has incredible patience to let shots run, to let the heart of the scene is over, characters are done speaking, and yet we're going to stay on them for 20 seconds as they walk out of the frame, and we're going to track out of the frame to show you what's going on in the city around our central actors as they live and engage in it. And that sort of context is so palpable in 2049. I mean, you get so much glorious context, what's going on, where they are, how the camera moves. Like, I feel so intimate with every major set piece. I feel like I could just walk in and know where the bathrooms are, from the Terrell place to the Burning Man set to wherever. I feel like I'm in it, and that is, God, that's to be respected in as we're going through a series where shot lengths are cruising down below 4 seconds. It's really cool.
And they're beautiful shots too.
Yeah.
I mean, they last. Nothing feels slow and bogged down. I mean, it's all beautiful. It's all artistic. It's all planned. And I think that he and his team know how to do that. It can be a very challenging thing to do, but I think they do an amazing job with it here.
The cast, we've got Ryan Gosling. He is the Blade Runner. How did he pull it off? I haven't read any commentary about him and his performance, and I like him a lot. I'm a fan of Ryan Gosling and his work, but I have heard people, friends, family who don't like him as much. They find that he is sort of under emotes in other movies, and boy, are they going to have a field day with this?
Yeah. Well, luckily it works in context of him being a replicant. So.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever been disappointed with Gosling. I'm not one of those people who has that issue. Mm-hmm. I loved him, this similar sort of character that he plays in Drive, that kind of closed off character. I think that he excels at that, and he does a great job of playing this conflicted Blade Runner. And it's interesting watching his two different, what do they call those tests? The baseline tests. Just the subtle differences in the way that he was answering between the first time and the second time. It was so interesting to me because it's such an intense test. But clearly there's something in his brain that's making him not answer correctly. And they're just like, oh, you are so far from doing well on that baseline test. And it was so interesting, but it's just such subtle things that he does that I think that he's really kind of just one of the top actors right now for me.
Appreciated those moments where it's sort of like the emotions are very subdued, but then you have the moments when he goes to visit sort of the memory maker woman, and she says, well, let me see the memory that you're, think about the memory, and I'll tell you if it's, I'll tell you about it. And we have that moment, and she looks at it and says, no, this was a real memory. This happened to somebody, and he thinks it's him, and this we have a huge emotional response for him. And then when there's sort of a twist, and the child that he's been looking for, he discovers that it's a girl that he should be looking for, and there's just this shift with him as well, whereas he thinks he's on the trail for one thing and it's going in a different direction. There are those emotional moments that I think he carries across really well. And as Pete referred to, even earlier, the moment with the big joy billboard, there are those moments. And I think it's a credit to Denis of letting the camera sit, on him to give him the time to do that. And I thought it was a nice balance of the calm and subdued replicant with these other peak moments that to me worked really well without going over the top.
The opening sequence with Dave Bautista, we have a glimpse of that I thought was really touching. When after they've been fighting each other, and he stands up and says, "Please, don't get up." Yes. I thought that was just the delivery was just perfect. I was right in it. Robin Wright plays Lieutenant Joshi, Madam, and she's. Wow, of course I'm super fan of Robin Wright. I think she's just fantastic. She brings her House of Cards kind of flair to this to this role in particular. One of the things that really struck me is just how sane her reactions were. That she wasn't a maniacal evildoer. She really, it felt legitimately like she was protecting the future that she thought was in peril.
Oh yeah, I mean the conversation about there's this wall, and if they both if both think it doesn't exist, that leads to war. And then the moment the other scene where she's at his apartment to talk with him, are two that really stand out for me. Of these, she knows, and she even admits, sometimes she forgets that he's a replicant. That's how good he is at some of these things he does. And to me, it was an interesting way to see her, interacting with him to communicate those, I'm your boss, I'm doing these things, but then also sort of that opening up, the personal connection that she shares with him.
Jared Leto is Nyander Wallace, and here's another one. He has been portrayed in interviews as the bad guy in this film. Is he the bad guy?
I think that goes to your point earlier about where's your Rutger Hauer, monologue moment, and we don't get that type of thing because it's not that type of movie. He's not that type of villain.
Not to say he doesn't speechify, because he certainly goes on while he's slicing the replicant's belly open.
Oh, he does. Yeah, he does. And I think, it's an interesting character. And I think having watched the three little shorts that sort of fill the gap in time, because there's one that focuses on him that gives a little bit more about him and the new replicants and how he sort of positions and leverages himself to get into the position of power that we see him at in this film. Because the short focuses more on him starting down that path of, I've got these new replicants that obey no matter what. There is a little bit of that in here. He always refers to them as his angels, which I think is an interesting sort of little quirk about him. But what I appreciate is he's sort of the visionary that sees this potential and is frustrated by the limits that he's bound by. Of, he can't make enough of these because there could be billions, which means there could be trillions. And, we're on 9 planets, and we should be at the edges of the universe, at all these stars. And he has such grand visions. And so it's not the maniacal, evil, corrupt. It's the, let me have my grand vision because I have done so much for humanity. There is so much more than I can accomplish. I'm frustrated. It's not out of, evil, selfish intent that I see strongly. It's, the desire to do what he feels is best, which I think always makes for an interesting, for lack of a better term, villain, but I guess, antagonist to the story.
It's interesting you bring that up, too, because part of what I like so much about his angle is that he's making a very real and contemporary economic argument that we have to make more replicants because we don't have enough people to do the work that needs to be done. Right. Well, we're there like now. We need more people to do the work that needs to be done. And the solution in this universe is, robots that look like humans but are really strong. And it presents something for us, that mirror to hold up, to think about what lengths will we go to solve this very real and present economic challenge.
But he does it in a way that, you know, a slave master spins his logic to you, right?
Yep.
As to why, which I thought was really interesting, and the whole fear that he has of the possibility that that these replicants might have a baby because of what it could end up representing for his own business. So it's interesting how it is also business minded for him, but really I think it speaks on such a much higher level. So it was a fascinating character. I really liked him, and I was endlessly impressed by Sylvia. Is it Hoeks or Hakes? Hoeks as Hoeks.
Sylvia
I don't know if I had seen her in anything before, but she was so mesmerizing and brilliant as the as Wallace's replicant sidekick, and the way that she handled herself was brilliant. And I loved her, what I think is really her defining moment in her final fight when she comes at Gosling's character and is just like, I'm the best, you know. It's like that says so much of who she was as a character. And I was like, wow, that's okay. I know what, you know, there's a lot more to her motivation than just kind of helping Wallace achieve what he's trying to do. I mean, she tears up when he's killing these other replicants and stuff. I mean, it's a really complex character, and I'm so fascinated by her, and I'm really looking forward to watching this again just to kind of see more of what she's, just the little things that she's doing. It's really brilliant.
Or the scene with Madame, where she comes in and she's like, you know, replicants, that we can't lie. Well, I'm going to tell him that you came after me with a gun and I had to defend myself. Basically, you think you know what we're capable of, but you really don't understand us. And, you know, just really, again, like I said, the replicants, the level of self-awareness, whereas in the first film they were aware that they had an expiration date, and that was sort of what was driving that rebellion of we want more life, whereas this is, I think, a different level of finding their place and purpose. It's not just about more life. It's, you know, we see a whole movement of we need to be recognized as a people.
Yeah, and her evolution over the course of the film was really quite special in that same regard, right? She doesn't become, we think she's a host, you know, we think she's the Rachel. But she turns out to be the thug, you know what I mean? Like I thought that was a really interesting transition and great use of character. She's terrific. A number of other interesting ancillary characters, you know, David Dasmalkian and Lenny James and Barkhad Abdi but we do have this, you know, Dave Bautista, whom we've mentioned, and Jared Leto. They don't have huge roles in the film. They have important roles, but not huge roles. Where we see more of them, where they get to sort of star in their own story, is in the shorts that kind of went along with this movie.
It was nice that they had those shorts so that we could get a little more of these characters and a little more backstory. Because, I mean, Dave Bautista, I mean, he's out of the film after 15 minutes or so.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the first 15 minutes and he's gone. And so seeing that short with him gave me a nice little extra bit of who he was. His short, more than any of them, felt more like a deleted scene to me. It didn't feel quite like just a standalone short.
Absolutely.
But it still was nice because it gave me a little extra meat about who he is as a character. I really liked that backstory for him. You know, you don't need any of them, I don't think, but I do feel all of them. I mean, I would argue that you're going to want to watch Blade Runner and the three shorts before you jump into this. I feel like there's a lot of meat in this story and you want to have as much help getting into it because I think there's a lot to absorb. So I say it's all pretty necessary to watch before jumping into this one.
Finally, Sean Young is back as Rachel, sort of.
That was the most talked about thing. As soon as the credits started rolling, there was just a lot of discussion. I went with several people, and there was a lot of discussion of, okay, what was that?
Yeah.
Because we're trying to figure out, and it's like the big mystery. It's like, okay, whether Deckard's replicant, I don't care one way or another. I want to know, what was that Sean Young? Because there's the was that the Rogue One, Peter Cushing, Carrie Fisher, or was that the Robert Downey Jr. Civil War de-aging? Was she there and they de-aged her, or was this they created an entire CGI Sean Young based off of the footage from the original?
Well, it's kind of like what they did in Rogue One. It's they had a performance actress there, kind of acting her part, and then she came in and kind of they used her to kind of pull some CG, some looks and all of that sort of stuff,
Okay.
and then kind of do some of that de-aging. I mean, this is kind of all my understanding of what they did. And then they also took archival footage from the 82 movie. They took images of her at the time, and they used all of that to kind of create this digital version of her that I thought was pretty impressive.
You bought into it. I was taken out of it pretty quickly, and it just didn't feel like that. That was not a successful effect for me, and I think it's because probably I don't know. I mean, I just watched the final cut. I just spent 2 hours hanging out with her, and it really shocked me to the point where I wasn't in the scene anymore.
I think I bought into it because I was acknowledging that, this is another replicant version of her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's not going to be a flawless, perfect version. And sometimes her face didn't quite look Sean Young,
Well, and that's what I'm
exactly
talking
like Sean
about.
Young.
That's what I'm talking about.
But I'm like, but it's another recreated version of her. So I totally was fine with it because it felt like it fit in context of the film. I mean, even Deckard points out, it's like her eyes were green, so it wasn't completely perfect. So I totally I guess that's why I totally bought into it.
Well, and that's what I mean. Like, I really love that she was there. I love that Rachel walks up those stairs, and the entrance. God, it was perfect.
Oh yeah.
The silhouette entrance walking down that weird, totally ineffective bridge over the water was amazing, and just the overall look and the hair and everything was just perfect. And then they show her face, and I was like, oh well, that doesn't feel as great to me anymore. I just was taken out of the effect didn't hold up for me as well, and I think it's just proximity to the original. But
what I did appreciate, this goes back to a conversation I think you and Andy had during Search for Spock, when you're pulling in footage from the previous film in the sequel.
Mm-hmm.
That, in Search for Spock, it was like, oh, they're watching, Wrath of Khan. What I appreciated was they're going to use that. They used that, when Deckard first, runs the Voight Kampff test on Rachel. But the way they did it was the audio and then the camera footage from the actual test equipment, which was just the eye.
Yeah, the eye.
They go into the records,
Yeah.
and I thought we didn't get it from, imaginary
Right.
camera point of view. They pulled it in that way, which I thought was perfect. That's the information they would have. There were no other cameras in that room to create that scene. So I loved how they were able to pull that in, because I thought, how are they gonna? What are they going to do? Are they going to recreate scenes? What are they going to do? So they've got that. And then the only other thing we have is we have Rachel. We've got footage, I believe, from the original of Rachel walking toward, but that's from Deckard's point of view. And I think that's sort of, we're getting his memory of that. So that was one of those things of how do you build a sequel? How do you pull in those moments from the original and do it in a way that's logical and makes sense for this film?
Yeah, very effective. It was nice to see Edward James Olmos, even briefly.
Oh, he got a chuckle in
yeah.
the audience. Everybody was, I think, happy to see him. I think it was a nice surprise for everyone.
Was there a symbol that I missed? He was folding the origami bull.
Was it a bull or was it a ram? I wasn't quite sure what it was.
All right, so let's say it's a bull or a ram. Did I miss a symbol?
No,
I don't actually know what either of them mean.
Not that I'm aware of.
I feel like there might have been some intention. I mean, obviously there was an intention of what they chose, but yeah. I couldn't pin it down.
Roger Deakins is behind the camera on this one. Good Lord, the colors.
Was he ever?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Oh my God. This I don't know. For me, I walked out saying that's the thing he's been working toward.
Yeah.
The worst thing that came out of Roger Deakins' cinematography on this is the atrocious, split down the middle orange blue poster pattern that they've taken from it. It's just like the worst version of that orange blue pattern that people have fallen in love with for movie posters. And it's like his work is so perfect in this film. Why demean it by making these awful posters out of it?
Yeah, and you know what's funny about that too, Andy, is that there are posters in the campaign that are brilliant.
Yeah, right.
You know, and that use colors well. I think the orange Harrison Ford standing in front of the giant Burning Man statue with just Blade Runner 2049 over it, and then we have Gosling standing alone in blue hue next to the spinner, and it's just great. It's those stupid hero posters where you have all the characters all stacked up that are just awful.
Yep.
And he used those color tones so well in the film. Like, he really did. It's just expert use of these hues that I think are super engaging and really give us a sense of, how color is used to affect the scene or to frame the scene for us. I mean, we get a really great sense when he moves from the farm to downtown to, I mean, it's just the colors really lead us through the movie. And I think, the art design of the campaign didn't follow.
No, it really was some of the most stunning cinematography. It was so perfect for this world.
Yeah.
I mean, just the change in tones and the quantity of each of those tones. Watching it on such a big screen with just such intense oranges when he's flying into kind of like that Vegas area, it just was mesmerizing. It was just like haunting the way that that sandy orange color was everywhere, and it just filled the screen from corner to corner. It really was just fantastic, absolutely fantastic.
And then you contrast that with the fight in the casino where you've got the holographic, Marilyn Monroe and Liberace and Elvis Presley and Vegas showgirls, the holographic, and the colors are just so vivid there. This isn't one of these like, let's desaturate the future and everything's sort of gray. We have those moments, but then he gives us the color so well and so brightly and vividly that, I mean, that's what Vegas is, right? When it was, flourishing. Outside, yes, it's all orange, but color, in the right time, in the right place, it just really, I think, helps establish the feel and setting of each of those places, looking at the colors and the palette that he's using, no matter where we are in this vast world that we explore through this film.
One more point on the cast and the way they do this, the way the cast and the set, the production design work together. I sometimes find that when you are in one of these big sci-fi experiences, that you'll always have an actor on screen that has some sort of fish out of water excitement about where they are and what they're looking at right now, right? We have it in Valerian, we had it in Jupiter Ascending, we have it, like they're just in, oh my gosh, we're now in a giant hall. Somebody's going to look up and be really impressed by the glitz and the glamour. And that happened nowhere in this film. I mean, nowhere. At no point did anyone seem surprised by where they were. And I thought that was so cool. This is where they live. This is what it looks like that they live there. It's not impressive. It's not exciting. It's not depressing. It's just, it is what it is. And I couldn't get over that. I walked out of the movie just really impressed that nobody was impressed.
I think the audience had more of those moments of awe.
Yeah.
Like when he gets to sort of going to the orphanage where the kids are, and he walks in that building, and we see sort of the stairways and everything, and there was an audible gasp from a few people of like, oh, that's the place from his dream. Oh my gosh. And I think his reaction to that of, this is really familiar, and just sort of that creeping unease. But it was, I think, again, the awestruck reactions from the audience to these shots, rather than the characters who should not be in awe of the world that
they should not be in awe, right?
Right. That's
don't show me how impressed you are with yourself.
And it makes sense character-wise too, coming from replicants, right? If he was doing that, it would have been like, why is this replicant kind of acting that way? It would have felt out of character.
Mentioned production design. Dennis Gassner headed up production design for the film. It's beautiful. It's great. Congratulations.
Stunning stuff. Stunning stuff.
Really stunning stuff. Visual effects shared by MPC, Buff, Double Negative, and Framestore. But besides Rachel's face, which struck my eye funny for any number of reasons, there's nothing in here that felt like it wasn't an earned visual effect.
There were so many times where I looked at this and thought, we're there. You know, whether it's the dusty Vegas or the crumbling wasteland, orphanage land, or the city streets, I thought, okay, how are they building all of this? Where, you know, they did a lot of production in Hungary. So I'm just looking at all of these places thinking they're so rooted there. The visual effects were, you know, I know they're there. I just don't see them.
Yeah, it all felt incredibly real. I know they filmed some of it in like Spain and Iceland and Mexico. So they got some nice landscapes from some other parts of the world to tie in kind of just the way that the ground looked. I think they might have just been aerial shots, but they still gave us a sense of that world. But I mean, you're right. The sets felt so lived in and present. And whether it was like his apartment or Deckard's hotel that he was living in, or the whatever that crazy the shoreline was, that big shore wall that they had, or where all the children were, it all felt incredibly lived in and real and authentic. And I think that it speaks highly to finding real locations and not just relying on digital creations of things, because it just everything feels so real, and grimy.
Yes.
Goodness. And the snow, you guys, the snow was gorgeous, leading all the way to the final shot of Kay laying down on the stairs in front of the memory lab. It was an incredibly emotional moment. I mean, just everything came together perfectly, especially the callback to the theme from the first film. It was just such a beautiful gift.
I just have to say, the sound, I was blown away right from the start with the sound. I went and saw this in a Dolby, just one of the Dolby cinemas at my local AMC, and it's not like the rumble seats that you sit in, but they have plenty of stuff to vibrate underneath you. And the way that the sounds came through, I mean, I felt like I was vibrating for half of the film. It was just so intense. Like there was so much bass in this film. These sound designers I felt like the team between Theo Green designing the sound and then Ron Bartlett and Doug Hempel, who were doing the re-recording mixing, they found like sounds that felt like they were from this world and integrated them in just the right way to it. Just like the sets, just like the images that Deakins captured of Gassner's sets, everything felt like it was a part of this world, and it just blew me away. I really was like, mind-boggling at the amazing sound coming at me from the screen.
Oh, those guns! When those guns go off, I mean, that's a gun going off. There's some,
Nobody ever tell you otherwise.
No, it's not boo, 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 or zing, zing. It's kabam.
Yeah, those blasters are amazing.
Just, there's some weight to the sound that just carry. And a lot of I had the same experience with my seat rumbling just from the bass, and it gave some gravity. For lack of a better term, to everything going on there.
Yeah, I did the same thing with those. We have the RPX, the Regal Premier Experience, and those seats have the little rumble packs under them a little bit that just do the extra vibration. When the opening soundscape of the spinner flying over the farm was the vibration. Thought I was going to vibrate out of the seat. It was amazing. So music, the Vangelis soundtrack in the original film is iconic. How well does Benjamin Wallfisch and Hans Zimmer, how well did they recapture the original?
I was initially disappointed when I heard that they were doing this and they didn't bring Vangelis back to do the score, because I feel like it is such an iconic score. It's like you really need to have the same person come in to do it again. Unfortunately, they didn't. Even though Vangelis is still busy and working, they did not bring Vangelis back, which was, for me, it still is a disappointment. And then Johan Johansson, who had done some previous scores for Denis, he did Prisoners, Sicario, and Arrival. He was on board to do the score. And I'm like, okay, well, that's interesting. He's done some good stuff with him. And then they ended up bringing Hans Zimmer and Benjamin Wallfisch in to kind of, I don't know if they were working on it with Johann, but somehow all of a sudden Johann wasn't on it anymore, and he was contractually forbidden from commenting on the situation. I was like, wow, okay, something really crazy happened over there in the composing land for 2049 that may not bode well. And I will say I was a little nervous about what they're going to do, because Hans Zimmer is a hit or miss for me. But I was floored. Like, it felt like it was Vangelis composing. Like, it fit so perfectly with it.
Yeah, I hadn't been tracking anything going on with the production, so I was waiting in the credits like, okay, it's of a piece with the original. So I was eagerly waiting. Okay, who did this? Because I know that Denny works with Johan Johansson, and I thought, okay, maybe he's done a nice job of doing this, or are we going back to the original score? To me again, it's that nice fluid transition from the original to this one, and that score helps carry that along.
I thought it was good. I feel like it was much more focused on just sort of the underlying sounds of a scene that were sort of filled in with synth and symphony, and it was lovely. I feel like the Vangelis score offered us more themes that we could, that I can sit down at the piano and play, and that are sort of beloved to me as I listen to that score. It's much more memorable. And while I feel like this score fit the film perfectly, it's rare that I feel like there was actually anything that was overtly musical and melodic that supported each particular scene. And so I need to listen to it. I haven't actually sat down and listened to it yet, but I look forward to it because, and I hope I'm wrong. I hope my memory is just playing tricks on me, but it's not a memorable score.
Well, yeah, to your point, I mean, I didn't walk out humming any themes or anything like that, other than the one theme of Vangelis's that they do pull in right toward the end there.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see how it does hold up when listening to it on its own.
Yeah.
What about we have Elvis and Sinatra in there? I know Steve over on our Slack group, you were commenting. You noticed that they were on the soundtrack. You're like, why are they? Included?
It threw me for a loop because I got online and looked for the track list and everything to see, and I saw Elvis Presley and Frank Sinatra, and I thought, oh no, how does this work out? Because I always have concerns when you project into the future and you're going sort of retro, and how does that work out? But I think it served its purpose really well because we're that much farther in the future. It's in Vegas. These are two iconic, Vegas singers that it makes sense that they would still be, present in that location. So to me, it was fitting and it worked well.
Yeah, it was brief in the film.
Yeah.
At least it definitely, I think it fit.
There are still fans of Blade Runner, the non-final cut. I mean, this is an interesting film, just the history of it, because of the number of edited versions that Ridley Scott did over the years. The original cut was, I guess you could say, it had a bit more of a positive ending, kind of like the original cut of Brazil. It was just something that I think stuck in Scott's craw. And he went back and kind of tweaked it. And then he finally did the final cut, like 10 years ago or something like that?
Yeah, it was like 2007 or something.
And this is, and I feel like this film pretty much kind of kills any other version. Like anyone who's a fan of that first version of Blade Runner, I'm just like, well, I don't know if this is really going to work as well as far as a sequel goes. I don't know. I feel like the team was like, we've got to make this sequel, but it's going to be from the final cut, and you're not going to be able to connect them as well if you're a fan of the previous one.
It has been so long since I've watched the original that I don't even think I could tell you where the doors have been closed anymore. The final cut is the only cut for me.
Well, yeah. I mean, all I remember from the original theatrical is, the voiceover narration. And I believe the final scene is Deckard and Rachel in a car, like driving off, and they're driving out in the country.
Right.
So,
right, okay. Yeah.
Well, they eliminate the unicorn dream, and they might even eliminate the unicorn origami at the end. So there's really no sense that he is a replicant in that version. That version really kind of says, "Hey, I'm just a human."
So, and as I said, at the beginning, this one it could be ambiguous. So I think you do end that version with them driving off out of the city, which does tie in. You can make that connection to the sort of the farm. Where this one picks up. So to me, that can work. Or you go with the final cut, which, is a, much, different feeling towards the end. And I think either one you can fit, but from the interviews I've read, they intended to really build off of, final cut. But I think, fans of the original theatrical release, well, I don't think it's closing doors or unraveling anything from that film that's going to cause conflict or problems.
Yeah, maybe not.
All right. Well, I think it's probably time for us to rank it.
Let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/TNR Film Board to look at all of the films that we have talked about on the film board and see how it stacks up against other new releases at the time. Andy, where do we start?
First off, we got Blade Runner 2049, or Steve's favorite, The Finest Hours. I'm waiting for a Just Like She Did joke.
You'll go see Blade Runner and you'll like it. Just like she did. Oh, no, this is Blade Runner.
Definitely Blade Runner. Definitely Blade Runner.
All right, Blade Runner or Prisoners. Hey, look at that.
Blade Runner, and I don't have to feel guilty about it.
No, I'm fine with yes.
Yes, Blade Runner for me. Prisoners is a tough one to watch.
Yeah.
I have yet to rewatch that one. I'm not quite sure I want to jump in.
Especially when you have children. That's a
absolutely.
torturous film.
Blade Runner 2049 or Guardians of the Galaxy.
Blade Runner.
Big and heavy or light and fun?
Yeah, I mean, this might be part of the old post-film hangover, but I'm Blade Runner.
Yeah, Blade Runner.
Yeah.
Blade Runner or Edge of Tomorrow?
It's getting more difficult, but I'm still Blade Runner.
Blade Runner, yeah.
I am too, yeah. Blade Runner or Logan? Blade Runner for me. Yeah. Michael Green is okay either way.
Yeah, right. No, I don't have to feel guilty there either. That's good.
Yeah.
All right, Blade Runner or Star Wars, The Force Awakens.
Okay, so this was an interesting conversation my brother and I had. We didn't get into Harrison Ford's performance much in our discussion tonight, but watching this, you get the feeling that Harrison Ford just sort of rolled out of bed and said, well, this is what I'm wearing, and I'm here to work. And, I had read, some of the challenges that J.J. Abrams had in directing Harrison Ford on The Force Awakens of trying to get a specific performance of, like, do it this way, and Harrison's just like, I'm doing it my way. When I look at the performances that he delivered in both those movies, I have to pick Blade Runner because there was so much more to his performance in this one. And I think the story and the depth, and it's two films, Star Wars and Blade Runner, fond memories from my childhood. But as a grown adult man, and I loved The Force Awakens, but I am so much more thrilled that there are films like Blade Runner 2049 that challenge an audience, that give me a mature story to think about, because this is a film that I think people can sit down and talk about once you delve and peel all the parts away about what it says about the nature of identity and memory and what it means to be a person and have a soul. There's lots of things to delve into, and for me, that's what sets it above The Force Awakens, which is a tremendously fun film. I will always side more towards the artful side and films that give you something to sink your teeth into.
I'd like to say something, but Steve just said everything that I was going to say. So there you go. I'm going to vote just like he did.
Just like he did. Yes. Andy with the joke. Okay, I would just like to say that I'm going to vote in favor of Blade Runner because it is such a model for assistive devices for the visually impaired. Those little cameras were dope, right?
Oh, my gosh.
With the brain plug-in.
Yes.
And so I know Jared Leto as a method guy. I know he is up in arms about people making fun of him for wearing blind contacts like all the time. I don't give him any grief about that. I think he is a terrific actor, and he did a great job in this film. But I could not get the blind cameras out of my head. I believe he has those. Actually, I believe he has those, and they're floating around all the time. That was amazing.
Yes.
Absolutely fantastic.
Blade Runner.
All right.
Well, there it is, guys. We have a new number one on the Film Board's chart. Number one out of 63, Blade Runner 2049.
Wow.
Pretty impressive. Where does this stack up for you guys between the original and the sequel?
I think I'm still hungover, and I feel like it's too premature to say that because right now I say I definitely, this is I think the film that I would put ahead of the original. But the original is the original. You know, it's got a better score, and it has Rutger Hauer, and those things are pretty important to me.
For me, it's going to be the original. I think it's going to be hard to surpass that. It still can stand on its own as a solid film. This one, I have a hard time seeing this as a film that will ever be able to exist outside of the first film. Like I don't feel like you could just put this on really. Yeah. I feel like you need to kind of watch them as a pair. And so because of that, I feel like there's that step down that for me it takes, because I need to put Blade Runner first. I mean, it's an iconic film. It's an important film to me. But you know, this is a close second.
But that's also an enormous compliment, the fact that they made this film with such respect that it is considered of a piece with the first movie. Like, that's incredible.
I never expected it.
Nope.
No. And I to me, what sets this one slightly ahead is the first one. It's a much smaller story, which is great and is done well. But I mean, you're confined to a couple city blocks, and it's, you know, those few characters. It tells a very small story and does it very well. And this tells a much larger story across greater, you know, sort of geographical space. It really cracks that open. And to me, I love the larger questions that at least this one I feel is asking. But I look forward to like 2-3 years down the road, you know, sort of seeing how this one ages. So I'm with Pete. I'm sort of leaning more towards this one for those reasons.
I will say I hope that from this they do decide to do more little shorts, because I had such a great time with the shorts, and especially the anime version. I'm like, I don't know why there isn't an anime series in this world. It's so perfect for it. So fingers crossed that they do end up, you know, finding an audience and making some money, and it allows them to expand a little more.
And they should make one in the Lego universe.
Are you saying Blade Runner Lego?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
So where does that take us on Letterboxd? Letterboxd.com/thenextreel. Out of 5 stars, and like or not like?
So Pete, if you were sitting next to me in the movie theater, you would not have heard any stars leaving. It had 5 stars, and it lost none of those along the way.
I'm definitely 5 stars and a heart.
Yep, absolutely. Same thing. 5 stars with a big heart.
Carry the 1. Well, that does well.
Yeah.
Where do we go from here?
Well, we're going to be our next film board. We're going to be talking about the remake of the Agatha Christie story, Murder on the Orient Express.
Oh, is that a feature-length film? I thought that was like an Imagine Dragons just music video.
I'm very curious about that music choice for the trailer.
I love that song. Boy. You guys, cut it out.
It's a great song.
It just doesn't.
Why
fit
is it in the trailer?
Yes, I don't.
Didn't you guys see Sherlock Holmes? That this is that. It's Murder on the Orient Express with effectively Robert Downey Jr.
And a big bushy mustache.
Yep, that too. All right, and on the main show, we are still talking about Star Trek. We finished Next Gen, and so now we're back to the future with J.J. Abrams and Star Trek 2009. That's gonna be good.
Definitely looking forward to it.
All right. Hey, good talk, gents. Thank you so much for seeing this movie and rating it so highly. I was really nervous coming into this show, but always a pleasure talking about films with you. Steve Sarmento, have a great week.
And you as well.
Andy Nelson, I'll talk to you very soon.
Yes, you will.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to The Film Board. You can find and follow us over on Facebook and Twitter, and we would love it if you'd help us by joining up over on patreon.com/thenextreel. Consider giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, or even better, tell the movie lovers you know that they should come hang out with us on The Next Reel, because when the movie ends,
Our conversation begins.